So I think I will just skip this part for everyone. I think most of the people know me. So the agenda that I've taken for today is, first of all, I would like to explain what data services in Azure really are, or what does it mean. And the next thing I will try to speak a little bit about is why should we automate this, and which tools can we use. Another interesting question is, given PowerShell or Azure CLI, what should you use? And what I will do, as well as I will do a little demo on this. So let's start. Okay. So what are data services in Azure? If we're speaking of data services in Azure, we speak of platform as a service. That means that you don't run a virtual machine with a SQL server on it or something like this. But what you're doing is you have a platform service like the services that are offered by Azure. There are several services which are offered. You can put them into categories in non-relational and relational services. The non-relational services is Azure Cosmos DB, and relational services we have Azure SQL Database, Azure SQL Warehouse, Azure Database for MySQL, Azure Database for MariaDB, Azure Database for PostgreSQL, and Azure SQL Managed Instance. And at the moment, they are also building more like a bracket on all of this, where you have all the capabilities to have analytics, which is one of the topics Oliver is talking about very heavily, Azure Synapse. But for this talk, we just will concentrate on these services. So the question we have is, why should we automate, for example, creation of these services or management of these services? Well, first of all, if you're getting or if you're new to Azure, the Azure portal is really nice, and I think the guys from Microsoft did a very good job here to have a very complex thing, which is Azure, built into a nice to use graphical interface, which is an Azure portal, but there are some shortcomings. First of all, scripts are more reliable than the portal, because it is, if you have a script, then everything what you would like to configure in your solution is part of the script. So when you just click things in the portal, this could be that it is not so repeatable, because if you just click things, maybe you forget something, or maybe something wasn't thought of, or something like this. And another interesting thing is that what you can use is you can use your code as a documentation. So when you're using this code, then you see everything which you're doing is in this code. And to repeat what you have done, you don't have to remember the steps you take in the portal, but what you can do is you can just run your script again, and hopefully it will do the same thing again. Many people who are used to administering graphical user interfaces are maybe are a little shy, or have a little problems to use code, or to use scripting languages. If you just give yourself a little time, and if you just use these things, I think you will really easily get used to it. If you, for example, if you're using PowerShell, the PowerShell syntax is very clear. There is first of all, there is a verb, then there is a dash, and then there is a substantive. I don't know at the moment what this is in English, but it doesn't matter. So it's very easily built up the syntax, so that you, even if you're not sure about how you should do things with Azure, what you can do is you can just guess how the syntax of a command would be. And on the other hand, Well, what you're really doing, if you are using a script, is you're just writing the things you're clicking in the portal. You just write them down in the script. That's all. It's not so complicated as it looked like when you're doing it the first time. And the other thing is, even if you're not using PowerShell, then if you're using Azure CLI, and this is what this talk is about, even then there is a special syntax which can be easily remembered. So it's not that hard at all, because what you don't do is you don't really program like you would program in C# or you will program in any other language, but you're only using a scripting language with a very clear syntax. So everyone who has not tried this yet, I would strongly advise you to just try it. And if you if you do it, and if you do it a little longer, then I think it will be the same with me, that you fall in love with this kind of work, or with this kind of doing things, and because it's really great to do this in scripts. So and another thing which is very important compared to clicking in the portal is that scripts can be, and for sure should be, under source control. So what you can do is you can just change things, and you can just put them into source control, and maybe after a short while, when things break or something doesn't work as expected, you can always go back to the last step you had, or to do the last version you had. And scripts are easy to change, because what you can do, if you just misconfigure something, you can just throw away all your resources and correct what you misconfigured, run the script again, and everything is up again. And that is, in my opinion, this is a really big advantage. So which tools shall I use? So there are very great tools out there you can use when you're working with Azure and when you're working with automation. First of all, there is Visual Studio Code, which supports PowerShell as well as Azure CLI, and is a really great editor, which also is available on multiple platforms like Linux or like Mac OS, which is really great. The other thing, what is great as well, is Azure Data Studio. I like it very much because on the one hand, you can use it for building, for example, SQL projects, and meanwhile, it really supports SQL projects like Visual Studio does. With SQL projects, I mean only the relational stuff, not the reporting services or integration service or something like this. And on the other hand, Azure Data Studio has also a very strong PowerShell integration, which is great as well. And what you should use as well is Git as a source control system. Could be if you could use this as an platform offering, or what you can do as well is, if you are on-prem with this, maybe you have a Team Foundation server or something like this, you can use Git as source control as well. And the good thing about this is that Git is already implemented into Visual Studio Code and Azure Data Studio. So when you're just working with code there and writing scripts and everything, then you can easily just check it into your repository. Another interesting...
Frank, I have an old school question. What is about our lovely SQL Server Management Studio? Is this now out of date for these kind of tasks?
Not really, but what Microsoft is saying is that the Management Studio will continue. It will support all the features that SQL Server version will have, but it will not be the point of innovation. Okay. Everything which is really new. There are amazing things going on in Azure Data Studio, like, for example, having notebooks, like from Jupyter or something like this, right? And this is a very interesting thing as well, which is really interesting in having your infrastructure or your environment as code. Because what you can do as well is you can have it in a notebook and you can describe it. So you can really put in good readable markup language code where you can describe what you're doing in the notebook, which is it's really awesome. Another thing I would like to put an eye on is the Azure Shell. I don't know if you know this URL here. This is something that I came across maybe 2 or 3 months ago. If you just type in https://shell.azure.com, then you will get on a full screen Azure Shell without the Azure portal, which is, if you're in the Azure portal, you can always get an Azure Shell if you just click on Cloud Shell. But this one will show it. We will come to this a little bit later. This one will show only the shell without the portal, which is really great. And it's great because if you use this, then you don't have to install all the tools on your local machine. You can just jump in. You can just type in your credentials for your Azure subscription, and then you can start, because everything you need, like Azure CLI, like the PowerShell commandlets, like everything you need to program in Azure is already there. So you don't have to install anything on your local machine. And another thing that's awesome as well are the resource manager templates. Resource manager templates are JSON files where you describe your environment. There are two things you can do. First of all, you can more use the more imperative approach, where you just tell the computer what to do. Create a resource group, we'll create a SQL database, whatever. And the other thing is, what you can do with resource manager templates is, in the resource manager template, you can just describe your environment and then just execute the template, and the template will just spin up your whole environment. This is a little bit comparable to what you can do with Docker or what you can do with Kubernetes. And yes, I managed to place Docker in this talk as well. Okay, so and this is really awesome to have a look at as well. So the question is, PowerShell or Azure CLI, what should you use? And this is a question that I came across if I talk to clients very much. They ask me, Frank, shall we use PowerShell? Shall we use Azure CLI? And always there is no best way to do this. It really depends on your preferences. So do you have a Windows background? Do you have a Linux background? If you have a Windows background, maybe you are also used to PowerShell. If you have a Linux background, maybe you're used more like to Bash Shell or something like this. The other thing is, what are your development systems you're using? Another thing is, what's really important to know is that PowerShell and Azure CLI have the same capabilities. You only write what you would like to do. You only write it differently. So there's no reason why you should take one over the other than your preference and your system. So when you're working mainly on Linux or mainly on macOS, then I would suggest you use Azure CLI, because although Microsoft is porting PowerShell to the to macOS and to Linux, they are not really at the moment. They are not finished, and they are not there where PowerShell is on Windows. So some of the or most of the PowerShell commandlets for Azure don't work on these machines. But what you can use is, you can use Azure CLI instead. And and to my opinion, PowerShell is a better shell because of one simple reason. The simple reason is that if you're using PowerShell over Bash Shell, and I think maybe Ben will just see this differently, but if you use PowerShell over Bash Shell, in PowerShell you're using or you are working with objects. In Bash Shell you're working with text. This is a huge difference, because if you have an object, you can just access its properties. You can just access its methods, which is not able, or which cannot be done when you just have text. And on the other thing, what you have to do with text as well, if you get text back as a result from something, you just have to do sometimes you have just to do some really ugly parsing, and this is something which is not done in PowerShell. Okay, so let's get to the demos part. I think this could be more interesting than my slides. So I will just go here and I will just start a browser and I will insert shell.azure.com. No, I don't want this. And hopefully it will do something. Hello. It works like a charm. Okay, here we go. So what you do next is you just log in yourself, and here we go. Now we have a Azure Cloud Shell, and we can start to type in something as soon as our prompt occurs. And what you can do here as well is you can just, as you know from the Cloud Shell in the portal, you can just change it. If you're more like a PowerShell guy, then you just go for PowerShell here. So now let's go on and let's see how to create a SQL Azure SQL database. And we will do this. I will just shortly open my code. I will open it with Visual Studio Code, and then we will see what we can do. Okay. First of all, as you all know, we need some information on where would like to have our location. So where would we like to roll out our environment? I will choose East US here. And what I do as well is I just put in a random identifier, which we'll use for all the resources which have to have unique names. And hopefully no one has DBCC rules at the moment. So next thing I will do, I will just create some resources or some resource names here. We will use a little bit later. Next, we need some login information. To be very easy, I will do it this way. I will just put in the user and the password, which is something you never, ever should do in a production environment. For our demo, it's okay, but if you're using a production environment, what you can easily use is you can use Azure Key Vault, which is a secure environment where you can store secrets in. So next thing, which you also should never do in a production environment, is this one. What I will do here is in front of the Azure SQL database, or in front of the server which is running Azure SQL database, is a firewall. And what you usually do is you usually go and put in an IP address which is able to access the SQL server. Or you can put in an IP address range. Usually you would do this way, that you would put in the IP or the public IP address you see from your office, or with which your office is seen in the internet. I will just give access to all the internet here. Next thing we have to do is we have to create a resource group. If you are using a resource group, or if you're using Azure resources, then you have to put them always into a resource group. The resource group can be imagined like a container where to put things in. And if you're using the Azure Shell or the Azure command line, then you start always with the command AZ, which is for the Azure CLI, and then you just pick things like, for example, AZ group. There are all the commands which are related to resource groups, for example. And so there are different areas of commands you can use, and this is very common how Linux commands work. For example, if you are using kubectl for Kubernetes, or if you're using Docker, then you have exactly the same syntax here. Okay. When something was achieved or something worked, then you will always get some kind of a JSON fragment here where all your information is in. In this thing, we have that the provisioning state is succeeded, which is good. Next thing we have to do is we have to create if we are using Azure SQL database, we have to create a server which will host our Azure SQL database. and I will do it by this. I'm typing in Azure SQL Server Create, and I will give it a name. I will specify a resource group the server will put in. I will put in a location, the administrator, user login, and the password. I will do it this way. And now it's running. And a little bit later, we will get the confirmation that the server has been started, or that the server has been created. To be precise here, this is a server, but you don't really have access to this server. It is just the hosting environment for your SQL server. So you don't, or for your SQL database, to be clear. So you don't have to do anything like patching the server or something like this. All which is done through Microsoft, because what we're using here is a platform as a service offering. Okay, yeah, it's running. Usually that will take maybe a minute or something like this. Okay, there it is. So next thing we have to do is we have to configure the firewall, because at the moment we cannot access our server. I will do this by just putting in this. What we'll do again, we tell which resource group, which server, and we will give the start IP address range and the end IP address. So I will put in this: operation failed with that request. Detailed server cannot be empty on. What's the problem here? I think this. Oh, this. I'm not sure why this one doesn't work. Oh, so let's see what this server. This looks good.
Frank?
Yeah.
Only lowercase.
What?
The error message says only lowercase letters, and you have a capital R in your.
Ah, okay,
name.
yeah, okay.
Glad to help.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's great.
But Toby, you have another question.
Another question. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Toby asked if I want to make the passwords not visible in the shell history, can I integrate that with Key Vault? I think you mentioned Key Vault already.
Yeah. What you can do is you can if you're using Key Vault, then your password will be stored in the Key Vault as a key value pair. And what you're doing is you're just fetching the if we would do this, I would say to you, well, there is something like a database password or something like this, and then you can just fetch the database password from the Key Vault without having it in code or in history or somewhere. Was this a question or?
Yep.
Okay. So let's try to do this again.
Georg is asking, can I also use Azure Shell in VS Code?
I'm not 100% sure, but what you can do, Azure Shell, or what you're writing is you're just I can let you look behind the covers here. So what my script is code. You can have the shell here. And I think what you can do as well is if you go to terminal and to new terminal, then you can just add here a new terminal. I'm not.
A terminal type of Azure Shell, you mean?
Yeah, the terminal type of Bash shell. But I'm not 100% sure why I can. Yeah.
That. So you.
Yeah. Mine. On the other hand, if you're running on a Linux machine, or if you're running on a Mac, then you would surely can put in the Bash terminal here.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Toby says that there is for sure an extension for that.
Yeah. And maybe only my machine is a little bit misconfigured here. Who knows? Okay. So let's just start this one, which here general purpose edition by this with family gen. I will just go to Gen 5 then. Okay. So for some reason, couldn't find this. Gen 5 capacity. I will go to capacity 2. Maybe this will. Okay, why doesn't this work? So what I'm doing here is after I set up the SQL server, I'm just now it works. After I set up the SQL server, I'm now building a database on this server, which is not a real server like a virtual machine. It's just a thing that hosts my database. And what we can do as well is maybe this is something we can do. We can just look, have a little look in our portal here. I will just log in here, and I have to just log in. Yes, maybe do this. And what we should see is if I go to my MVP subscription, then we should see our new resource group, which is this one. And what you can see here, this is our SQL server. So all we did here in our shell for sure reflects to the portal as well. Maybe one hint here. There is our SQL database, and when we just look at here, we will see it. One hint here. This is what I mean. Sometimes the portal is a little bit slow, so the SQL database exists, and we could just log into the SQL database, this Azure SQL database, but it's not shown in the portal. It will show in a little while. It will show, and then you see that which are there. So the portal is a little bit slow sometimes. Okay, and this is it. So I think we're just in time. Are there any other questions?
No, I don't see anything additional. Oh, I'll just no, there's nothing additional.
Okay. What you can do as well, maybe this I will put the script on GitHub or something like this. What you can do as well, you can monitor, for example, the size of your databases by just issuing such a command. Or what you can do as well is you can scale up your database. So when we just scale up to something like this, if we just run this command, it will scale up the database without deleting it, because the database is there already. The create command can examine that the database is already there, and then it could just it will just size it and will not delete it and recreate it or something like this.
Cool.
Okay. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Frank, for your session, and for all of the other guys. You will get this session again via video in our YouTube channel over the next days, months, how fast we are with the preparation of it. But you can review this again.
Exactly.
Okay?
So stay tuned on Twitter, and there you will see when our sessions will be published.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, and bye.
Yeah, have fun. Bye-bye.
You too.